Everyone, my name is Ian Griffin with Nyle Dry Kilns, and today we're going to be doing a controls demo for the L200Pro controller. So let's get started. First things first, this is basically your home screen, or what we call the status screen. This is going to showcase kind of all your current settings, how long the kiln's been running, and all your equipment lists. And we'll go over that in a little more detail in a minute. This kiln program does have a screensaver mode. When you leave it for a certain amount of time, it will just show your current dry bulb and your wet bulb. And all you have to do to get back to the screen is just tap on the screen and it'll bring the status screen back up. So we're going to go through kind of everything on the main screen here and then start going through all these tabs and the various equipments one by one. So first things first, we're going to start right here at the top. When the kiln is stopped, so you see we get a green start button right here. That would normally be either a red stop button or a yellow pause button. We'll showcase that in a little bit. But when the kiln is stopped, you can change your different modes. So first things first, we've got our DH mode, which is our dehumidification mode. That's the standard dehumidification drying mode where your compressor is used to remove water and your vents only operate if you get over temperature. Then we've got our conventional mode, which is something that's, basically much more common with a conventional kiln. But for a DH kiln, what that does is it takes the compressor out of the equation and you would heat up your chamber, and then to remove moisture, you would vent like a traditional conventional kiln. And then we have our hybrid mode, which this basically utilizes the compressor as a heat source. So it'll run below your wet bulb set point. This can be really useful for really fast driving products, something that gives off water really quick like softwoods. And then you will still vent when you're over wet bulb. So it kind of takes the equipment and maximizes its water removal capability. So something like this would be really useful for, say, like softwood pine or like poplar, anything like that. Whereas if you're drying slower drying hardwoods, you'd probably want to stick with dehumidification mode most of the time. Over here on the left, we've got our set points. So we've got our dry bulb set point, and then this green box is going to be your dry bulb temperature. That's what the sensor is actually going to be reading and controlling off of. You've got your wet bulb set point, and then you've got your wet bulb temperature, and that's what your equipment's going to be controlling off of. So obviously your sensor placement in the kiln is critical. And if you have a traditional wet bulb and not an electronic sensor, if you have that dry out on you, then your wet bulb will skyrocket and it'll start working like a dry bulb. And you can create this snake eating its own tail effect where your compressor turns on because your wet bulb's high, trying to dry out the kiln. But because your wet bulb is dried out, it never gets lower. It stays where your dry bulb is. The compressor starts generating a lot of heat and you can get runaway temperatures and dry bulb spikes. So make sure you pay attention to that. If you have a traditional wet bulb, that sort of thing is critical. But I've run into a lot of customers that don't realize what a potential hazard that is. If you get a situation where your compressor is running flat out and there's no correct operating wet bulb to tell it when to stop, then you can damage product quite easily. So then over here, we've got I almost forgot our spray set point. We'll get into that a little bit more when we go into specific equipment. But if you had a spray system enabled, this is how you would operate it. You could put it to a certain wet bulb set point, basically, and it would spray until it hit that set point. You have the time when you hit the start button on your cycle. You have how long the cycle has been running in hours. And then you have when it was last stopped. So I did stop it for this demo. I am in the middle of drying some walnut right now, but it's not going to hurt anything to have it off for a little amount of time here. Over here, you have your equipment status screen. So on this particular kiln, heat, fans, vent, spray, blower, compressor, and then we have auxiliary heat and blower, both enabled on this kiln. If they're not enabled on your kiln, these might just be blank. There might not be anything here. When the kiln is operating, the colors of these boxes will change based off the status of the equipment. Okay, so that's a quick overview of your main screen. We'll start going through the various tabs, and we'll start with advanced settings right here. So when you're logged in, a couple of these are not accessible unless you're logged in, but you will have various more in-depth looks at the kind of the background of the Kiln controller. So you can see like a file browser. We'll open this up really quick. This is where you can get your log files and things like that if you need them for, you know, USDA inspectors, depending on what kind of records you need to keep for your customers or certifications. If you're just a hobbyist, chances are you might never ever need to touch these. We have regional settings. This is where you can come in here and you can change your date and time and your language and all that stuff. You can switch to metric if you want. You have your email settings. If your kiln's hooked to the internet, then you can have it so that it'll automatically email these log files when you hit the stop button, or your moisture content log files if you have moisture probes enabled. And you can come here and you can plug an email into this box. And then you can either email it whenever you choose, or you can have it so that it emails whenever you hit the stop button on the end of a kiln charge. Again, all of these features are only enabled if your kiln's connected to the internet. Then we have some more networking stuff. If you have IP addresses, if you're familiar with that sort of thing, this is where all that can be set up as well. And then in equipment testing, this can be really good for troubleshooting. You can come to one of these tabs and you can say hit start, and it'll run your fans for 10 seconds and then it'll stop. This only works if the kiln is off, and it's basically just kind of a maintenance troubleshooting tool. All right, we'll go back. And then we'll start going through the equipment. So this is your heat control. You can select it to auto or off. There is no always on. That's kind of a design philosophy. We think somebody forgets their heat always set on. It's a good way to cause runaway heat in a kiln. And this right here is your dead bands. So this allows you to see how the kiln exactly is going to operate based off your settings. So because you don't want to have equipment try to immediately turn off and turn on based on a specific setting. So like say if you were set to 115, if you say hit 115.1 and it turns off and then it goes back to 115 and it turns back on again, you can get a lot of rubber banding of your equipment trying to turn off and then trying to turn on immediately. So we build dead bands into every single piece of equipment so that you have a little bit of a buffer zone where there's time for the equipment to start and stop operating. So on the heat right now, if we're set to a 115 degree dry bulb, that means it'll cut your heat off at 115 degrees and it'll turn it back on at 114.5. And then you can see right now it's in standby because the kiln is off. Over here, you can have your heat ramp control. If you want to take a little bit of time to get up to temperature, you can plug in your parameters and how long you want it to take. And this will happen basically on every time you start up or make a new temperature adjustment. Go to miscellaneous equipment. So this is your fan mode and status and your auxiliary equipment. So if you don't have an auxiliary heat and blower setup, then this box will be unchecked. And then your fans, you basically have off and auto. So if it's an auto, it'll run based off whatever your settings are. And if it's off, then your fans just won't operate at all. And they're also in standby because the kiln is off. Once we go through all this, we'll turn the kiln on and we'll go through a couple of these equipment tabs again so you can see the different colors. Over here, you have our digital probe selection. If you had different probe types, traditional RTDs or electronic sensors, you could change that here. And then it also show you what the probes are actively reading so you can make sure you have the correct one. This can be one of the ways you can also have potential pitfalls if your kiln is set up to read off the incorrect probe. I had a customer one time that their kiln was set up to run off traditional RTDs, and the RTDs were just hanging on the wall. There was no wet bulb sock or anything like that, and they thought they were running off the E-sensors. So they were getting that runaway heat situation I was talking about earlier, and they didn't really know why because they thought they were running off the E-sensors. So we were able to change that back, and everything worked out okay for them after that. All right, compressor settings. This is the same. There is an off and an auto, it'll work the same way. It'll either not work if it's off, or if it's an auto, it'll run based off your parameters. It'll have your suction line pressures and your discharge line pressures. And it'll also show your dead bands based off of your wet bulb set point. So you can see if you're set to 95 degrees on your wet bulb in this particular kiln in DH mode, then your compressor will turn on at 95.5 degrees and shut off at 94.5 degrees to try to keep you close to that 95 you're targeting. This box right here is your suction line pressure and your discharge line pressure protection. This means that it'll cycle the compressor off if these parameters get to an unsafe operating temperature or pressure, and you're in danger of damaging your compressor. These kilns also have a backup mechanical safety switch that if for some reason, if this wasn't enabled and you hit parameters that were unsafe for the compressor, it would automatically reset that switch. And that is in the unit, and you would need to go in there and manually reset it before your compressor would run again. So this right here prevents it from ever getting to that point. The controller will monitor those values and it'll shut off your compressor before you have to risk tripping that switch. All right, and our spray settings, here we go. So this works exactly the same as a lot of the other pieces of equipment. You have an auto and you have an off. And whatever your spray set point is, it'll basically operate based on these dead bands in the same way. Now, a lot of L200s are not equipped with spray systems, just the applications they're used for or the environment they're placed in. It's not always easy to have a water source. But if you do have one, you're going to want to pay attention to your set point, because you don't want to create a situation where you spray up until a certain wet bulb set point and then it overlaps and your compressor turns on or your vents open to try to move water and you waste all that water you tried to spray into the kiln. So dead bands are important to pay attention to, and your actual set point is important to pay attention to as well. And if you do have a spray system in your kiln and you live up north where it gets cold and it can freeze, make sure you install it in a way that it's easy to drain so you don't burst lines in a cold snap when your kiln is off. And then I think the last tab we have right here, I already went over heat, it's vent. Here it is. Okay, so again, it works very, very similar to all the other pieces of equipment. Since we are in DH mode, our vent dead bands are only on over temperature. So you can see we're at 118 and 117, whereas our dry bulb set point is 115. So we'll go back to that. So if we get 3 degrees over our dry bulb set point, our vents will open and try to cool our kiln down. And when they get back to about 117, they'll close up again. So if your compressor is going flat out and generating a massive amount of heat, or it's just very hot where you live, this can cause your vents to operate relatively frequently as the kiln tries to cool itself down. Now, if you are in conventional mode, all these vent dead bands change, because now in conventional mode, we're venting off of our wet bulb set point instead of an over temp like we would be in DH mode. So it's good to have a good understanding about how all the different modes work and what the kiln's actually trying to do, so that the operator can see red flags if something's not operating as it's supposed to, or so they don't think the kiln's doing something that it's not trying to do. So we'll throw this back into DH mode. All right, so that's all the equipment tabs and everything right here. So we're going to start going through moisture samples. So this tab is tied directly to the schedule tab we will get to in a minute. So we'll skim this pretty quick. This is useful for hardwood customers typically. A lot of softwood customers would probably have very little value in this. And if you are doing moisture probes, or if you're cutting samples and putting the moisture content in yourself, that can populate this these values. And then when we get to the schedule, you can have moisture content steps. So this is a time step. So you can have a moisture content step, and it will advance to the next step in the schedule based off of the values that are in the moisture content tab. So if we're set to, we'll plug a quick number into here. Say we're set to 60%. We're set to 60%. Save that and go back. Oops. There we go. When the average of these samples gets below 60%, then it will go to the next step in the schedule. And you can fill out an entire schedule like that if you want. Would definitely have a lot more value with someone doing slower drying hardwoods than someone doing faster drying softwoods, but that is how it operates. And then you can basically check these for the controller to be monitoring them. If they're unchecked, then the controller is going to disregard them and not put them as part of the equation calculating the average. All right, so we'll get back to the schedule tab in a minute, but we'll go through these one at a time. The trending screen right here. Now, I believe it's because I stopped the kiln, unfortunately. How this would work is you would normally have a stop button here. This would be populating, and you could change the amount of hours you want to display. So we'd say select 99 hours, and then you would hit the stop button, and then you would be able to slide this bar back and forth to look at your graph and see how it spiked and dropped over the previous 99 hours. Since I have the kiln stopped, it's not actively populating data. So we could go to history. We could grab just one of these older ones. And then I think 99 hours might be too long for this one. We'll try doing 24. There we go. And it's not working because it hasn't filled out the entire thing. So yeah, this is like a short amount of data. If it was long enough, then you would end up sliding back and forth through it. So that's how that works. It's basically just going to be your dry bulb, your wet bulb, and you can see if there's any large spikes or dips. So if you do have something go wrong, you could pinpoint the time it happened and go from there. And then we'll get back to the schedule tab. This can have a lot of value for quite a bit of applications of lumber drying. We'll add a bunch more steps here just so that you can see kind of what it all looks like. So now there's 10 steps. You got page 1 and 2. You can use this plus and minus to cycle through them. So this is step 6 through 10 and step 1 through 5. You can change the name of your schedule here. And then here is how you would change how many steps there are. This box right here, you can make it so that it'll stop the kiln when the schedule ends. If this box is not checked, then when the schedule ends, it will default to whatever settings are plugged into these boxes here. So if your schedule is not enabled, you can see right here, there's a green button to enable. It'll give me a pop-up, cannot enable a schedule because it can only be enabled when the kiln is running. If the schedule is not enabled, like right now, then the kiln will run off of these settings until somebody tells it to change. If the schedule is enabled, then it'll run off whatever is plugged into the schedule until the schedule runs out, and then it'll determine what to do based on this box. It'll either shut the kiln off or it'll default to your manual settings. So we'd be able to come in here and change each step to have different drying modes. We could say have a conventional step, a DH step, and a hybrid step all in the same schedule if we wanted to. We could have the step be a heat ramp or a time step or moisture content. We could determine how long we wanted the step to last for, and we have our settings. And again, if you have a spray system, you can enable your spray setting and you can plug that into your schedule as well. So you would build and design kind of your own schedule, whatever you were drying for whatever species in here. And then you would be able to name it and then save it. And then when you are saving and loading files, it's important to know that the kiln controller puts all files in the controller under one list. So if you go to load files at a previous date, you would want to make sure you click the one that says UDTF. It'll populate there, and then you click this button. Well, I think you have to hit select, sorry. Hit select, and then you can upload it with this button here, and it'll load it, and then when you go back, that schedule will be showing in here again. And when you go to save it, you basically just click on that, and then you would hit this icon and it would create a new file after you hit save, and that would be your new schedule. And that's how you can make multiple schedules to save and load between. A couple things to note. There are some restrictions to schedule names. I think it's a 16 character limit, and there are certain punctuations that do not work. Like I don't believe you can say use an underscore or something like that, or a slash mark. So your schedule name is probably better. It's the simpler, the better. Something like 4/4 red oak for like 4/4 red oak, or, 2x4 pine, whatever you decide to do. But keeping your schedule names simple, especially because it will make them easier to find out of this list if you're saving and loading schedules. And then the very last thing is just your alarm screen. You have all these different boxes for your e-stop, log errors, your probes, your heat, all your various equipments. And if something goes wrong with them, they'll flash red and they'll start throwing a blinking red alarm here, and you know something's wrong with one of your pieces of equipment. So I think that covers about everything. So we're going to do a quick kiln startup, and you can see kind of what it looks like as I get this walnut going again. And then we'll do a quick run through. This also gives you an option to auto start your schedule, which if you have a schedule plugged into there and you want to use it, you could click this box, and when you hit confirm, it'll automatically start the schedule. You don't need to go to the schedule tab and enable it afterward. I am running this kiln manual for this product though, so I'm going to leave that unchecked and hit confirm, start kiln. And there it goes. We've got our auxiliary heat kicks on first, then our blower, our other blower, our heat, and then our fans are all running now. All these have turned green. All right, and that's it. So that was a showcase demo of the L200Pro controller, the new version that just went live this year, 2025. I hope you guys all enjoyed it. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Our number is 800-777-6953.